All right, I think I'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I know almost all of you. If you want to turn on your video, you can, but if you don't want to, that's fine too. My name is Jim Martin-Schramm. I'm the policy analyst for the clean energy districts of Iowa. And a while ago, Andy Johnson asked me to develop a web page for, or yeah, I guess a web page for the city for the CITED website on data centers to provide a resource hub. And so that's what you see in front of you is the landing page, and Christine's gonna navigate for me. Um, there's the link in the chat. Notice at the bottom is the little button for chat. If you click on that, Christine has put in the chat a link to this portion of the SETI website. And I encourage you now to sort of click on that link. And if you can bookmark it, that's probably not a bad idea. But my job today is to introduce you to this resource hub. This is the first session of 3 on data centers. We may have more, but for now anyway, this is what we have lined up. So today is just an introduction to this resource hub on the SETI website about data centers. On June 18th, John Zakrasek, who's with the Linn County Energy District, is going to give a session on what's happening in Linn County, which is where an awful lot of development is taking place. And then on July 2nd, Andy Johnson will introduce Brian Krambeer, who is the CEO of MiEnergy Rural Electric Cooperative, and talk about the possibility of some data center activity up in Harmony, Minnesota. Rest assured, at least at this point, I talked to Brian this morning, it doesn't sound like it would be a uber large hyperscale facility, but apparently they do have up to 50 megawatts of available transmission capacity that could serve one or more data center facilities. So those are the 3 dates today, June 18th and July 2nd. Christine will be sending a unique to you Zoom link to each of these sessions, and we look forward to you joining us. So, Christine, can we scroll down here a little bit? So the the hub is designed to provide reports, analyses, trackers, and policy tools to help advocates, local officials, legislators, and regulators make sense of the rapidly evolving data center landscape. Um, right now, I send updates to Christine every Friday, and then over the weekend she gets the changes made. And so the site is being refreshed on a regular basis, updated. There are probably things in here that are not correct. There are probably things that are missing. And so if you have suggestions for improvement, please email me. Use that link right there on your on the page, and let me know what you think needs to be included or updated or things that need to be corrected. My job today, this is billed as a 45-minute session. Christine says we could go to 60 minutes if questions lead us down that road. But my job today is to introduce you to this resource. So I'm going to go through each of the sections, with the exception of the Linn County section, because that's the focus that John Zakrasek is going to, that'll be the focus of his presentation on June 18th. That said, I hope prior to June 18th, you will have read that section through in its entirety. It's in a question and answer format, and I think will be quite illuminating. You can see the flow here, and I'll try to spend more time on that penultimate section, resources for concerned citizens and local governments, because I know some of you are very much engaged already in your counties, either as an elected official or as an energy district. So, Christine, let's jump into the introduction. Notice at the top of each section there is a chunk in green which tries to briefly summarize the content of the section. And notice that if you don't like reading stuff online and you have plenty of paper in your printer, you can print each of the sections by clicking on that button at the top. This section it provides some information about the kind of range and size and type of data centers in Iowa. Talks about the expansion of electric generation capacity to meet the dramatic increase in demand, and comments a little bit about the ramifications of that. So I think the first thing to emphasize here is that the term data center covers a wide range of facilities, from smaller cryptocurrency mining operations that can range up to 30 megawatts, but collectively could be, in the state up to 90 megawatts, a smaller 1.5 megawatt and mid-sized data center facilities that can be up to 5 to 50. And that's perhaps what might be in the future for Harmony if things go through public process. And Brian Krambeer will share more information about that on July 2nd. And then, of course, the large hyperscaler data centers, which service cloud computing and artificial intelligence. And that is generating quite a bit of concern in the state of Iowa, especially down in Linn County. Okay, so I'm going to not spend too much time. You can read the cryptocurrency section, keep going. The small and mid-sized stuff is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. I do want to focus on the large hyperscale, in part because the development of these facilities is going to have a huge impact here in eastern Iowa on Alliant Energy, which is one of the two investor-owned utilities in Iowa selling electricity. MiEnergy has been servicing the data center industry for, I don't know exactly how long, but well over a decade. And their sales reflect that. Their industrial sales are really quite a bit larger than Alliant's. And despite that fact, they have some of the lowest rates in the Midwest. And currently, Alliant has some of the highest rates in the Midwest. And so the concern about increasing infrastructure in the Alliant service territory has lots of people wringing their hands to some extent. So there's a map there. If you scroll down a little further, or no, sorry, Christine, keep going up. CleanView is an entity that tracks data centers in the United States. They produce this map. I can't guarantee that it's, absolutely accurate and absolutely up to date, but in terms of something that you can use to get a sense of what's going on, not only within the state but nationally, this is one resource that you can consult. You can see the blue hyperlinks, and they should all be working correctly. If they're not, please let us know. So scroll down, and there you can see the big orange bubbles. The orange bubbles are the planned data centers. And you can see how Des Moines is very much a center in the state of Iowa for data centers. And of course, Des Moines and the Des Moines Metroplex is served by MidAmerican Energy. But you can see the big bubble there by Cedar Rapids. And just scroll down a little further, you can see the data centers, the large ones that are in operation. Again, this list may not be entirely accurate or exhaustive. Some of these companies don't really want you to know how big they are. But this is, by trolling the internet. And by the way, there is no way to gather this kind of information without using the services of data centers. And so that's the irony, is that a lot of this information, of course, is assembled using search functions through Google, etc., and then other more specialized questions through Google Gemini or even Claude. But nevertheless, this is all based on CITED research. So you can see the existing capacity is about 1,246 megawatts. If you go down under planned or under construction and look at the bottom line there, you can see that what is being planned or is already under construction is 3 times the size of existing data centers in the state of Iowa. And you can see now on the far right-hand column that MidAmerican and Alliant kind of have more or less an even share of these new data centers. The last line above the total, QTS2, is about a data center that was originally slated for construction in Wisconsin, in Alliance, Wisconsin Power and Light Service Territory. They ran into public opposition, and Alliant said, well, maybe we can help you in the interstate power and light service territory here in Iowa. So Alliant has signed an energy services agreement with QTS for a facility of a current maximum size of 370 megawatts, but we don't know exactly where it will be located. Alliant has informed their shareholders that they will be filing an application for an individual customer rate in the first half of this year. So we hope to learn more about where this facility would be located soon. Keep going down. That paragraph is important there, expansion of electric generation capacity. MidAmerican has a bucket load of wind, and recently got approval from the Utilities Commission to add 800 megawatts of solar. Alliant Energy has, I think, 800 megawatts of wind, and now got approval to add another 1,000 megawatts of wind. They already have 400 megawatts of solar and 400, they're in the process of installing 400 megawatts of energy storage. So those are all good things from our perspective in terms of the clean energy districts of Iowa. But this table in front of you is causing serious concern. If you go back up just quickly, Christine, keep going up to the existing capacity. Oh, I'm sorry. It's further down. My apologies. Go back to this table. You can see the amount of capacity. This is a new power plants, and the vast majority, all of these are either simple cycle combustion turbine facilities, which are sometimes called peakers, or they are reciprocating, they're called RICE facilities, reciprocating internal combustion engines. All of these are going to burn fossil fuel, and the vast majority of them, if not all of them, are going to burn natural gas. Simple cycle facilities are less efficient and more expensive than combined cycle facilities. So if you scroll down, this is the existing capacity for natural gas generation in the state of Iowa, and you can see in the far right column how much how much capacity each utility has. And you can see that some of these facilities are combined cycle. And combined cycle run more often. A peaker plant is supposed to run more or less 10% of the time when summer peaks are high and all the air conditioners are running. Combined cycle traditionally serves baseload power and also is less expensive. Well, you can see that currently we have a combination of these kinds of facilities, but all of the new facilities are being proposed as simple cycle combustion turbines. And that's going to increase the amount of pollution associated with these facilities and increase the cost. So if we keep going down, oops, sorry, just a little bit more. This last section explains that what we're talking about is basically doubling the amount of installed capacity. And so with that means a significant increase in the amount of natural gas. The two facilities that Google and QTS are planning to install or are in the process of installing in Cedar Rapids will increase Alliant's statewide load by 50%. And the other QTS facility will probably push that north of 60%. That's an increase in demand on Alliant's system that is really unprecedented in the history of the company and frankly in the history of most electric utilities in the United States. So we're facing an unprecedented moment, and I think stay tuned. I think CITED will have more to say about this reliance on natural gas and especially simple cycle backup. So benefits and costs. Again, that green section summarizes what this section focuses on. Um, I forget who I was talking to the other day, but they have a loved one who has very serious cancer. And it is clear that cancer therapeutic interventions are becoming more powerful, more effective, and more diverse every month as AI contributes to cancer research. Um, there's a whole range of ways that artificial intelligence can improve our understanding of climate change, of figuring out new materials in material science, etc. So this section tries to be honest about what the benefits can be, and they can be quite significant. At the same time, if you keep scrolling down, there are a variety of economic impacts as well. There are a lot of coders who are discovering that their jobs have been replaced by these artificial intelligence engines. And there are lots of other sort of entry-level jobs in the finance sector, in general administration, that are also susceptible to being replaced, frankly, by these artificial intelligence machines. Um, One of the reasons why the data centers are locating in Iowa is because the state has uh, um, a, um, a fairly comprehensive set of incentives to lure them. And unfortunately, none of these incentives are tied to any particular performance standards or reporting requirements. And I'll get to that later, but you can review this table at your leisure. And if you scroll down, Christine, there's a link just above there to the Iowa Department of Revenue that explains the incentives. There are also local incentives from cities, from TIF financing to land aggregation, um, zoning changes. So there are various ways that communities in Iowa have been enticing these data centers to the state. Um, those tax incentives right now, it's further up there somewhere, Christine, but I want to say it's about $150 million a year. Yeah, 150 million in Iowa. But the value of those tax sales and use tax exemptions could grow a lot very soon. And so, it's give and take. Yeah, you get all of this construction, but on the other hand, you're also giving up a lot to attract this business to your state, and at what cost? So let's get down further to the various concerns about water, energy, pollution, etc. Next to accessing enough power for data centers, the next issue is accessing enough water. A lot of these facilities use water as a heat transfer medium, and so they pump water through their facilities that get really hot from all of these electronic machinery, and then they dissipate that heat into the atmosphere and in many cases just discharge that water into or re-inject it back into the aquifer. Some facilities like QTS use a system like a radiator in your car that has glycol or some other heat transfer mechanism, and they just pump that through the facility. That requires more energy to do, but it's far less water intensive. So you can see here, this table shows you daily water consumption by data center type, and you can see, the equivalent households in the far right-hand column in terms of daily direct water use. So where this water comes from, if it's coming from groundwater, if it's all treated water through a city's water treatment plant, um, it creates great challenges on sourcing it and paying for all of that. Um, you can see that second paragraph there about Iowa State geologists calling for a protection plan for Iowa's precious groundwater. And at the rate at which these facilities use water, I think it's reasonable to be concerned about rapid depletion of groundwater in Iowa. There's other kinds of issues here related to water. I'll let you look at that on your own, including the Duane Arnold facility. That's another whole separate can of worms that I assume John Zakrasek will talk about to some extent on June 18th. Energy consumption, where is all the energy going to come from? I just showed you a table about the planned power plants that we've seen thus far. The U.S. Congressional Research Service has projected that data centers could account for 16 to 23% of total U.S. electricity consumption by 2030. That's that's a lot. Um, so these are really energy intensive facilities, and this is where I gave you that 60% figure. So you take a look at that. If a lot of that energy is coming from natural gas-fired power plants, well, the natural gas supply cost to an electric utility flows through automatically to ratepayers, and the same is true for the natural gas fuel cost for heating fuel customers. And so these data centers have more money than God. You and I don't. And so the concern is this great new demand for natural gas could rapidly increase the cost of natural gas and therefore affect ratepayers uh, in a significant way. Keep rolling down. Pollution concerns are various. I just talked about, if you double or more the amount of natural gas combusted, you're doubling or more the amount of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter emitted into the atmosphere. There's thermal pollution when you've discharged that when you've siphoned off the heat from the facility. Where does it go? Some of it goes into rivers and streams. A lot of it just goes into the atmosphere. Well, that drives up warming in that area for humans and other species. Noise pollution is not a minor thing either, and light pollution is not a minor thing. Finally, another topic that maybe John will talk about is during the construction phase, there is always waste, and that waste has to go somewhere. And right now, it's going to the Cedar Rapids landfill, and apparently, the construction there is going to shorten the life of that landfill, and it's very difficult to site new landfills. So that's an issue that hasn't been really discussed much. But there's also the issue of electronic waste. The electric equipment in these facilities tends to last 2 to 5 years, and then it all gets swapped out. Well, what happens to that discarded equipment? And if it's not recycled properly, then hazardous materials can enter, um, can be in our water, in our soils, etc. Finally, natural gas equipment concerns. The rapid build out of data centers is, if you own stock in GE or Hitachi or some of these other companies, you were probably smart to buy that because they can't meet all of the demand for these natural gas power plants that is coming at them. And so, frankly, the earliest facilities are going to come online that rely on these natural gas-fired facilities is by around 2030, and they're going to come in a lot more expensive than they were just a few years ago. So that's not good. Transmission, I'll let you read that. It's a fair bit of concern there, including about eminent domain. And so it's just part of the cost of doing business. If you're going to get that amount of power to a single place, you've got to have high voltage transmission and substations, and all of that costs money. And ideally, right, the large user is paying for those costs. But if the large user is here today and gone tomorrow, guess what? We're going to get stuck with the costs. So keep going. All right, Jim's talking too much. We're going to not talk about the Linn County piece. Next chunk is role of Iowa Utilities Commission. So the Utilities Commission is in the hot seat on these. They are the ones that approve the tariffs that are used to determine the cost of the energy delivered to these large data centers. In this case, we're talking about facilities with a new load of 25 megawatts or larger, but of course, the large data centers might be 600 megawatts. But in any case, both MidAmerican and Alliant have individual customer rate tariffs. You can read the differences between them there underneath that, different thresholds for entry, how bills are calculated, etc. Long-term commitments is a real concern. Alliant only requires a 5-year minimum contract, whereas MidAmerican has at least a 10-year contract minimum. But we're talking about like the natural gas assets, those will have at least a 20-year depreciable life. Well, what if in 10 years these facilities are not needed because technology has changed so rapidly, or the whole China has taken over the AI world, and there's the American businesses aren't able to justify their existence. Well, guess what? I mean, those facilities have to be paid for, and so anyway, this is a concern. But and CEDI has not been actively engaged in the Commission's review of these tariffs because they are treated as trade secrets by the utilities and are only subject to the review of the Commission, its staff, and the Iowa Office of the Consumer Advocate. All the real details, the most important information is redacted from any public version of filings before the Commission. And that, I think is a very serious problem that perhaps the legislature can address. But in the course of its review of the tariffs, the Commission has developed and refined a set of annual reporting requirements designed to protect all ratepayers. And here I've tried in non-regulatory speak in plain English to try to explain what these annual reporting requirements are. I don't have time today to kind of go through all of these, but I think they do reflect careful consideration by the Commission and its staff, and hopefully will protect ratepayers from the downside. Okay, keep going. And the rest of this page, if you're a regulator, that's what these resources are designed for, to help them figure out how to do their jobs better. So I won't go into those. Let's go to the next section. This is probably the one most of you are interested in. Sorry, let me just get a quick drink of water. So you can see what this thing covers. If you're reading the news, you know that the backlash against data centers is now kind of at a fever pitch. Heat Map, which is a subscription service used both by data center developers and their opponents, just did a study, and it found that at least 7 in 10 Americans now oppose a data center being built near their home. Hundreds of projects being canceled due to local pushback. And we're certainly seeing that in the Midwest. As I mentioned, there was the QTS facility in Wisconsin that's being moved over here to Iowa. And so this section of the CEDI Resource Hub page is really designed to provide resources for concerned citizens, local elected officials, etc. Some of these resources come from advocacy groups, and you can see the list here. I'm just going to focus on one, the datacentertracker.org. So Christine, if you can click on that. I think the way this works is it scrapes from the internet, especially news articles about data centers. And so you can see the two different options there, data center responses and legislation tracker. If you go down, let's stick with data center responses, then go to filters. So you can plug in, you can just look for Iowa, and there you go. And then scroll down. And then it shows you the various sorts of locations where communities have been grappling with the influx of data centers. And if you click on Dubuque County, it'll show you the kinds of things that they have gathered information about. Let's see here. Yeah, I go to Henry County. What's that going to say? Moratorium. Uh, yeah. And then if you click on action categories for moratorium on that gray on the right column there, Christine, does that? Yeah, well, just down there. Oh, I guess it just tells you what the category is. Well, so this will give you, in some cases, it gives you links, direct links to the documents, but in many cases it doesn't. But at least it gives you some sense of who's doing what. Um, and it's a place to look for ideas and discussion. If you go back to the website, Christine, and then scroll down into the local government section, and click on county moratoria, these are PDFs of moratoria approved in counties in the state of Iowa that I have gathered and will continue to gather. And so this is another place where you can come and try to read the text of what other counties have done. There's a similar folder for ordinance language. So yeah, there you go. Um, and again, I'm not making any claims that this is comprehensive or exhaustive. And so if you're aware of other counties and the approved language or language under consideration, please send that to me, especially if you have the PDF or a link to the government website that provides the information. Okay. So then this the rest of this section includes other resources that may be helpful to you. This resources for regulating data centers published by Climate Exchange is quite good. I think they're doing at least 5 toolkits there, and you can see the ones that have been produced so far. Um, and and then the kind of content of the transparency and accountability toolkit is summarized to some extent in these bullets here. So again, we don't have time to go into all the detail here, but there's a lot to dig into if you want to. Finally, media coverage. Some of you may have electronic subscriptions to the Des Moines Register or the Cedar Rapids Gazette. They have data center archives. I have links here to several Des Moines Register articles. Heat map is an excellent resource, although in my view it tends to be industry leaning, but I think definitely respectful of public concern. And so just a series of media pieces there. If you're not familiar with them, you can dig into them. I'm not sure I'm going to keep that peer-reviewed academic papers section. I suspect it's too, this is sort of a token entry. I think maybe you just eliminate it and assume that there is plenty of stuff out there. Because I wouldn't regard myself as an expert. So anyway, just a variety of resources. If you're into podcasts, there's a good one there from Volts doing data centers the not dumb way, which I found good and interesting not too long ago. And then let's get to the last section and have some time for questions. This section is designed for legislators and their staff to introduce them to what's been happening in other states. But at the outset, I talk about some legislation that was introduced in the last legislative session and a series of amendments to it, bipartisan amendments. But unfortunately, none of that passed in this legislative session. It's quite possible that next year could be a very different year with maybe a new governor and perhaps a change in the composition of the legislature. But right now, the Republican Party controls the House, the Senate, and the governorship. Um, Anyway, you can read through that at your leisure. And then the guidance from the chair of the Utilities Commission, Sarah Martz is the current chair of the commission. And Andy and I have both been very impressed with her leadership and her diligence in terms of trying to corral all of this stuff. And so in one of the in her concurrence with regard to QTS's individual customer rate agreement, she identified three contract provisions that she thinks Iowa legislature should consider codifying in statute. And you can see what those are, that longer contract term from 5 years to presumably at least 10 years, more conservative assumptions about the types and costs of generation to be built, and a minimum demand charge linked to a contract ramp schedule. It's a ramp just means how fast the data center is going to come online and how much juice it's going to use at a certain time, but to try to build in a minimum demand charge so that um, costs are recovered by the utility and not imposed on other ratepayers. So anyway, then this last piece is again really designed for legislators, but you're all voters, and so these are things you could be advocating for to your legislators. On the left is the type of policy. On the far right are examples of how this particular policy has been enacted in various states. Um, I've already talked about some of that. Flexibility and curtailment is really important. These data centers want their juice 24/7, but there are times when the grid is really stressed, and it's important that they be willing to reduce their consumption or even curtail to preserve the integrity of the grid. Something that right now is very much front and center for a lot of folks are non-disclosure agreements. A lot of citizens are very frustrated that their local elected officials have signed non-disclosure agreements with developers of these data centers, and thus they don't really learn about the details until the ship has sort of sailed, so to speak. So, trying to get your head wrapped around that is important, and you can see a couple examples there in Georgia and Wisconsin about how to handle it. Um, I was mentioning this, Christine, to my knowledge, there's no banning of non-disclosure agreements in the state of Iowa, which means that a city council or a county board of supervisors could entertain legislation banning such agreements. Obviously, the devil's always in the details, but I would say that's something that local folks can take on, perhaps with some success. I don't know. I don't know enough about. I haven't been on either end of that, but it seems to me to be a really serious issue. And then, you can read the rest of them there. Various kinds of policies. And then, as with the regulator section, then a series of legislative resources that might be helpful to legislators and their staff as they try to figure out how to regulate. We figured out how to incentivize them in Iowa. I'm not sure we figured out how to regulate them. We will. If you're on this Zoom session, that means you are registered for all three of these presentations in this series on data centers, as well as future sessions for what originally was our key advocate network with regard to legislation down at the Iowa Capitol. So hopefully you will join us on June 18th and July 2nd for the focus on those days. So, Christine, could you quit sharing and so I can see people? And yeah, there we go. Well, there's more here now than there were before, so it's great. And if you want to turn on your camera, feel free to do so. I didn't look. I don't know if there are any. No, I don't see any questions in the chat. So I'm going to open it up and pose any questions you may have. I'll do my best to answer them. I can't guarantee I'll be able to. Yeah, Don.
here in Mason City, Saginaw County, there's uh, the uh, the notice that we may have a big peaker plant built by Alliant that goes along with the uh, Emery peaker plant. Uh, is that due to mainly these data centers? And I guess I've been reading about what they're doing in Minnesota. Um, and they are talking about instead of having peaker plants or peak generation ability at the beginning of the cycle at the production level of the energy, they are installing batteries at the distributed end uh, to change it from natural gas to something else. And also, they can utilize their transmission lines a lot better if they don't have to have that peak transmission line available to transfer the electricity.
Yeah. Well, I can respond in part to your question. I don't have the electrical engineering expertise to address some of it. The facility that's proposed to be located adjacent to the Emery generating station is a 1200 megawatt simple cycle power plant. I think River Hawk, is that River?
Riverhawk, yes, that's what it's called.
And it is not reflected in Alliant's current resource evaluation study. And so the Iowa Office of the Consumer Advocate has noted this in its response to Alliant's application for a generating certificate. The Consumer Advocate has raised a series of concerns that the company has now rebutted in a subsequent filing. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But 1200 megawatts of a simple cycle combustion turbine is basically a jet engine on blocks.
Mm.
And it's wonderful for, when you think about pulling back and forth on the throttle in terms of balancing the grid in the face of intermittent wind and solar, but it's less efficient than a combined cycle power plant, and unfortunately, right now, more expensive. What folks in Minnesota, I don't know much about what's happening in Minnesota, but in terms of the use of batteries, I will reiterate that Alliant is investing in 400 megawatts of battery energy storage. Um, at least 150 megawatts of that will be in Allamakee County in the form of lithium ion phosphate batteries. And they are interested in locating some what are called energy domes that use compressed carbon dioxide to basically arbitrage. They would buy cheap renewable energy at 2 in the morning and then turn around and reinject it into the grid at 5 in the afternoon or 7 at night when
Mhm.
energy is more scarce and more expensive. So it's a credit to the company that they are doing that. Of course, they will rate base it, and all of us ratepayers will pay for it.
Sure, yeah,
Louise, you look like you got a question. I see. Look at me. Okay, okay. Um, so Don, I think I'll stop there and see if we have other questions.
sure, sure.
Don't be shy. And if you see something that's just absolutely wrong, please say so.
Jim, I
Well,
just want to
I,
jump in and thank you. That was a really comprehensive assessment of data centers and all of the resource use. So thanks for that. I had a couple of points I wanted to bring up about water. There are two issues, and you pointed that out. One is water use, and I'm assuming that they would have to get a water use permit from the DNR for the volume, the quantity of water that would be used for data centers. But the discharge of thermal pollution is yet another issue. Um, if they're not treating that heated water, well, I'm guessing they would have to treat it in some ways. Otherwise, they would most likely have to get an NPDES discharge permit to allow them to discharge. And if they're attempting to discharge heated water into high nitrate water that's part of the drinking water for either Cedar Rapids or Des Moines, and both both cities have nitrate problems with their source water.
Yeah,
That's gonna add algae to those rivers, and that's gonna increase the treatment costs for drinking water for the two
yeah,
largest cities in Iowa. So
yeah,
again, it makes me wonder about if part of their plan is to treat the temperature of that discharge water before it's discharged either into the Cedar River in Cedar Rapids or into the Raccoon or Des Moines rivers in the Des Moines area.
yeah. Great question that I don't know the answer to. Larry, you had a question or comment?
We've been participating in center discussions, and on the geothermal side, like you can correct me or help me out here, but like 40% of the energy that's needed by a data center is to cool them, and they generate a lot of heat. So the discussion is why not use ground source closed loop to dissipate that heat without expelling it into the atmosphere and incorporate ground source geothermal loops to reject heat, because that is an extremely efficient way and it reduces the overall consumption of the energy that that data center needs to operate. And that would definitely benefit in a situation like what Steve just described.
Yeah, based on what I know about geothermal, I agree with you. That seems to make a lot of sense. I'm not aware, however, of many facilities that do that. In part, I suspect that's because of the cost of drilling the wells that are needed at sufficient depth to transfer that heat in, deep underground. I know Luther has looked at geothermal for its campus, and the main driver there of cost are the wells. So, but on the other hand, I have a friend who knows a lot about the data center world and Google especially, and says, "My God, Jim, they have more money than God. They can afford." So presumably they could afford to drill such wells. But I agree with you, Larry, that it seems like that would be a very intelligent way to think about how to deal with the heat issue.
Well, any reduction in the amount of energy needed is going to take stress off the grid. It's going to help protect peak times that we've been describing. Area that ground uh, heat rejection would be very efficient in
Yeah.
our area.
Yeah, of course, you need to pump all of that material through that geothermal system, so you do have that issue. Uh, Don,
But
did you have?
circulating through a closed ground loop takes much less energy than circulating like an open loop
Yeah,
and pump and re-inject. And you don't have the water quality issues as Steve described. You don't
yeah,
have any algae buildup, any of those concerns. So at what point are you talking protection of the environment versus the dollar in
right.
the concerns that has been expressed for these data centers to take over your
Yeah.
neighborhood?
Larry, if you become aware of any community or state that is requiring the sort of geothermal heat transfer system, please pass along that information to me. I'd love to include it.
I believe you know who Brian Erlob is.
I know that
With
name.
Solus O'Brien, he did some of the
Oh,
research for Luther. I
yes,
just
yeah.
listened to his seminar about 3 hours ago.
Oh,
So
okay.
I can have him reach out to you and share some of what they have. They have
Yeah.
some pretty extensive research on that topic.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, good. Don, did you have another question or comment?
Yeah, why did the state of Iowa make such good incentives to draw data centers? They must have seen a big payoff from it that other states maybe didn't. Um, why was that?
I don't know. All I know is that we have the incentives. I
Mhm.
don't know when
Yeah.
they were really established and what the impetus was there. I'd love to learn more. So if any of you dig into that and learn it, please pass that along. As I said, MidAmerican has been servicing data centers for quite some time of all sizes. And they've been attracted to the Mid-American service territory because of their rock bottom prices and their green electrons. A lot of, the data center companies, Google, Meta, Amazon, they all have certain, green goals. And up till now, they've been, oh yeah, we want to source renewable energy. Well, now they're talking about needed so much that they're happy to get it wherever they can get it. And natural gas power plants is one thing. I did pass along to John Zakrasek something that I came across the other day that is a source of some concern. These facilities also will have backup generators, and those invariably are diesel. QTS wants to start testing their facility in Cedar Rapids, what has been built, to make sure that, all the electrical lines are working the way they should. And they say, well, we will run them temporarily with temporary generators. Well, invariably these will be, I would think, diesel fueled. And I know Elon Musk is running some facility down in Texas that is running on diesel pretty much 24/7 for forever. So that's, we don't want to get in that situation. That would be terrible. Benjamin Davison, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, just fine.
I want to offer my thoughts on that previous question. I worked in economic development in Eastern Iowa for a few years, and I learned very quickly the policy of Iowa, as far as incentives has been concerned for several years, if decades, has been to incentivize the maximum amount of industrial opportunity for Iowa. People want industries, businesses, and investment, capital investment. I don't think that however many years ago that these incentives were put in place, that Iowa considered what the actual economic, like qua jobs and wage growth and things, how the economics of Iowa would have been impacted. They just wanted to see industrial development. Smokestack chasing is what we've called it. And I'm sure you've heard the term. Now that it's becoming a more hot button issue, Iowans are reflecting on that policy and changing it now. It's not that they necessarily didn't consider it back then, but they were, for lack of a better term, greedy for being ahead of this AI boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I guess one thing I would say is that maybe it seems to me that regulation of data centers is clearly needed. And maybe we can tie some of these incentives to reporting, studies, various things, the agreement not to use non-disclosure agreements, etc. So if you want these incentives, well, you have to abide by this, that, and the other thing. I don't know exactly what that would look like, and whether it would have any political legs, but it seems to me that is a point of leverage that the state could have. Yeah, we've gone past our 45 minutes.
I do want to add that there was a question in the chat about where this leads with legislation and if we know anything or anyone who's considering taking this up for next year.
About the politics or any politics? Well, the resources for legislators page summarizes what came out in the last legislative session. I don't know of people running for office in this election cycle that are talking about data centers and if they are, what they are proposing. So if you guys come across anything like that, please pass it along. I'd love to see it. It's a good question. Beyond the legislation that was introduced this session, I'm not aware of any additional legislation being developed, but the large companies are always talking to legislators. They're always dropping legislation in their lap, and so the sooner we get wind of stuff like that, I think the better. Andy, you have appeared, and your halo is visible.
Yeah, some lights back here. I would just add to that question about state policy. I mean, states all across the country are struggling with this, and there's new models of state legislation popping up all over the place. And so some of the resources that Jim and Christine have linked on the resource page to these policies across the country are worth following, because states are trying different things, innovative things all the time. And between now and next January, there will be more things passed and more examples of that, and so it's a great question, and it's critically important. But also, of course, with our big elections coming up, as many of our policy partners advise us, a lot of folks aren't going to dive too deeply into your policy conversations until after the election. Well, that's a long ways away. So, but it's critically important. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, Beth.
Just along those lines, I'm wondering what role CEDI or Winneshiek Energy District or other organizations can play in developing boilerplate policy that could go, I feel like it's time to get ahead of the game and to play the same game that the other guys are playing. So
Yeah.
So what can be done by you all who are working in this arena?
Well, our first step is to just try to get our heads wrapped around it, and this resource hub is our attempt to do that. And CEDI has certainly supported legislation in the Iowa legislature. I can't say we've ever drafted legislation and sort of dropped it into the lap of a legislator and said, well, this would be a good thing. I'm not sure we're opposed to that, but we tend to work in partnership with other organizations. And we're a small shop. But I don't, I'll let Andy, be more definitive in this regard. I don't think we're opposed to that, but to be honest, Beth, we don't really have the capacity to write legislation. You need people that have the sort of experience with that and legal training, and so it's a challenge. But I agree with you that at this point it feels like we're playing defense, and how can we better play offense? And I will say this, that Brian Krambeer in his section is going to talk about the positive benefits probably to MiEnergy customers and the community of Harmony by having this new customer on their load, or customers. Now, whether that actually proves to be a net benefit, I don't know. I just want to be sure that help you. I want to say, Beth, that CITED is trying to be careful here. We're trying to establish a reputation in the state for being fair-minded and not knee-jerk and substantive, and yet at the same and bipartisan. We want to support stuff that has bipartisan support. And so that's why we aren't necessarily saying, oppose every data center everywhere.
No, that's different from what I wouldn't
That's
think
not
that
what-
would be a tenable position to oppose all data centers. As you said in your introduction, they're necessary and we're going to be building them. So how do we provide the assistance to have the good policies in place so that communities will benefit as much as possible and suffer as little as possible?
And that's really been the purpose of this resource hub is to try to identify various things and let you click your heart away to and dig through it, and then hopefully over time refine and find things that deserve to be commended more than others.
And just to add to that, I mean, specific policy wise, we have over the years worked with model legislation and shared among counties. So at the county level, we've done a fair amount of that. We're doing it on siting, clean energy siting, battery storage. We've done quite a bit of that. And so I do feel like it's appropriate for us to look at model ordinances in this space. The state level is a little bit different. As Jim said, we haven't in the past really attempted to bite off a lot of unique bill writing, but we have had significant ideas inserted into various legislation through legislators we worked with. And just briefly on this arena, like Jim said, we have already on our policy page a discussion of the bill that was in last session We've been talking, yes, with legislators about key concepts to go beyond that, and many of the best practices other states are testing. I would just suggest at the most basic level, for example, three really critical ones. One is a new large load tariff for all of these new customers with really explicit guidance to regulators to have no cost socialization and full cost coverage, et cetera, et cetera. That can go a long ways, and we would trust our regulators at this point to do a decent job with that. A couple that we had no reference, though, in last year's legislation and that would need to be added include a banning of NDAs. And we have talked with legislators and some utility partners about that. And that, in our opinion, my opinion anyway, should be universal. Just NDAs are kind of block everything else from seeing the light of day. And then another really critical one is the required curtailment for grid emergencies. Texas has done this, among other places. It was one of the first to say, look, if data centers are demanding all of this, eating up all of this new generation, when the grid is reaching peak demand, data centers shall not contribute to peak demand, or shall be the first to reduce essentially demand and curtail at the flip of a switch of regulators, essentially. Data centers hate that. The tech companies hate that. But then again, when it comes to either that or else, they're building all over the place in Texas. So, that's a very, very feasible. Those are just very beginnings, but there are some really key principles like that we're hearing a lot of openness to. And actually, without getting into too many details, a few of these concepts I've talked with Brian Krambeer about, and it'll be really interesting. That's partly why we want to have him on to talk, to give a utility perspective, because frankly, everything I have just said, he agreed wholeheartedly with. So we'll see how that conversation goes. But thanks for that comment, and I agree. We do hope to be more even proactive especially on this issue here.
We're past even an hour now. Ben, I see you have your hand up, and Don has his hand up. I don't want to impose on folks. Obviously, you can vote with your feet. I have to get to somewhere here in a little bit, but Ben, go for it.
Just real quick, say that I don't personally believe the state needs any guidance on how they legislate. They have lawyers and staff for that. The most important thing is that you demonstrate political will. So ask your legislators, talk to them. What are they doing? What have they thought about? What are their opinions on the issues? And try to educate them where you can. The best thing for any of us to do is operate on the local level, talk to our counties if they don't have ordinances. If they have data center ordinances, work with them on making them common sense, or if they're already common sense, work with our cities and local officials that might not have a grasp on all the information that is available to us thanks to this hub.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Don? Oh, you're on mute, Don.
I guess I don't quite understand why Alliant would be building a peaker plant up here in Mason City when most of the activity appears to be happening in data centers in southeast Iowa, a long ways away. And we already have a peaker plant here with the Emory one, and adding load to that grid, transmission grid at this time seems to be very strange. Am I missing something?
No, I don't think so. I think Emory is nearing the end of its useful life, or at least its depreciation schedule, so that may be one factor. Another factor is, where do you already have significant transmission and substation capacity? So that's another reason why Alliant looked there. But as I've said, QTS has another 370 megawatt data center that's looking for a home somewhere in the Alliant territory. So it's possible that that'll wind up closer to Mason City and to the Emory station. I'm not aware of that. I'm not trying to create a rumor.
Okay.
Not at all. I'm just saying that could be the reason why you would locate there. And of course, electrons, I mean, the stuff's moving at the speed of light, I think, right? And
Yeah.
so injecting it in one place doesn't mean it can't be of use, miles and miles
Sure,
away
sure.
pretty quickly. So. All right, let's wrap it up there for this first session. Thanks to all of you for attending. If you have questions, you have that link to my email. Please send me any suggestions or criticisms or whatever you have. We want to hear from you. And then look for that invitation from Christine for the meeting on June 18th with John Zakrasek about what's happening in Linn County, which is make your head spin around. It's pretty amazing stuff. So, all right, friends, take care. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
All right.